You are listening to OEUVRE, otherwise known as Somethingography, the internet's funniest artist reflection podcast.
Thank you for joining us. Today on the show, we are discussing M. Night Shyamalan and his whole career. We hope you enjoy this and share it. M. Night's a great director and artist, and let's get into the discussion for today.
All right, I'm rolling.
Okay. So, actually didn't come up with an introduction.
First episode, we don't. Yeah, there's no. What's the intro? What's the welcome?
Yeah,
welcome.
All right, I'll get my NPR voice on. Hello, we are here with Adam. How would you say your last name? This is something I have not practiced.
If I were to say my last name, I might say something like Bovoletis. Although, I don't know if that's really the right way to say it. I feel like it's you just have to say it in a Greek accent, then it's more accurate. Bovoletis. That's probably what it is.
I'm not going to try to repeat that because I can't get close to that. But I'm with Adam Bovoletis. Lettuce.
Thank you.
From Insomniac Film Festival, or at least that's where I know him from. Adam, would you maybe care to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, that is a great way to introduce me. That's how we met, and now we've become friends online. I think you're the only friend I've met online, actually, in my whole life. No, that can't be true. I've definitely met friends online. I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I'm part of a sort of film collective, I suppose you could say. We started as a film festival, and I guess we're still a film festival. I don't know why I said I guess. We are still a film festival. But we started to do a bunch of different events now, and, different projects such as a podcast called Is It Whack, which is where you first heard of us. We're based in Toronto, and mostly like to highlight and celebrate DIY low budget works from around the city, but we're sort of broad in our definition. We just like celebrating all work and giving a space to kind of create and to play and to mess around and try things and fail and succeed, and we like to celebrate all that. So yeah, we've been around for I think 8 years now. Me and a couple friends started it back in our last year of high school, and have continued going and morphing into new territory, new direction for the festival, for the collective, and now I'm here. So yes, that's me. I'm also a filmmaker, artist, writer, person who likes things.
I think it's
nice to meet the listener.
I think that's a beautiful way.
Oh, and I was saying this to you before. I've always wanted to be a guest on a podcast.
Oh yes,
and this is my first time being a guest on a podcast. So now I can add Adam Bovoletis, podcast guest, to my CV.
I'll give a round of applause for Adam's first guest podcast.
I'm so excited.
It's an honor to have you on. I do think, partially why I wanted you to be on this is because I feel like Is It Whack is this extension of film analysis more than film review, and I think those are both valid forums, but there's an interesting way I feel like you guys engage with movies on your podcast that both acknowledge them in so many different aspects as pieces of art, and doesn't really delineate like not elitism, but some sort of faux grandeur to stuff, and acknowledges like a amazing, like, thought-provoking movie can also like crack like blue jokes in the middle of something. So I think that's what's fun. Something I appreciate about that. It's not this very stodgy tie up to your shirt about movies and acknowledging the good and the bad, and like really actually like delving into like when something doesn't work, why it's not working. And I think that's a very something I've like learned from you guys is, I don't know, just it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
But
That's so nice. Yeah. That's a very nice thing to say. Thank you. I'm glad that comes across, because that's what we've always tried to do with Insomniac, and certainly like by extension, with the podcast is, just sort of demystify film and filmmaking, and kind of make it more accessible, make like talking about it more accessible. Everyone has great opinions on film. Everyone has great opinions on art, and we want to just kind of like open up the door to interact with it in whatever way like you feel comfortable, because that's what's cool about it. That's what's fun, and to sort of like even off the, like, we don't believe in any kind of distinctions between like high art or low art or anything like that, or like highbrow and low, it's just like we're all just artists making things, and we like to just try to respect everything and like engage with everything on its own terms. And so I'm glad that comes across, and that's very nice of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah. I thought that's why this format would, one, be fun, but also give space to, because I feel like within those episodes you only get to like hear about like the thought of someone's, like an artist that means something to someone for like a brief second. And I think in that podcast I did hear you at one point mention going through Shyamalan's filmography and having thoughts about it. So I thought, well, that might be the best place to start, because I think I think M. Night is a underrated artist who, like you say, has made. I don't know if you said this in the podcast, but
Yeah, we were talking about this beforehand, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. But yeah, there's a lot to say about him, and there's, I think, a lot to miss with him. And the way I think of it is, he's an imperfect artist making art where, in a world where people expect artists to be perfect or to like have like a full statement that doesn't have any blemishes on it. And I think there's something really like, two of the movies that impacted me of his, I have not seen in like maybe 7 years. I might have caught glimpses of them on TV, but as a child, they did have whenever I remember growing up, and I never really got into that part of the YouTube where people were very like mocking and dismissive of him as an artist. And I get why he became a punching bag. There's, I think, a lot of other interesting reasons why I think he became one, but I don't know. Yeah. There's probably some people who might have it'd be cool to find more analysis about who he is and his context of work as a filmmaker in like the American landscape, I guess. But anyways, let's can I ask you the first film you saw of his?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did mention that I think we did an episode on The Village.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite Shyamalan films, and I think like one that's very routinely dismissed. I'm sure we'll get to it. But yeah, I guess it was just a bit before that I had like decided to go through all of his films. That's something I just like to do. Like, I like to choose a filmmaker, choose a director, and then just watch all their films like chronologically from start to end. And Shyamalan was one filmmaker where I was like, I had seen a couple of them, to answer your question. I think the first one I saw was probably The Sixth Sense. I mean, I feel like the first one that most people have seen. I came out in 1999, and I would have been 3 at the time, so I definitely didn't see it when it came out. But I think it was when I was like getting a little older, first really getting into film, that that was one I'd heard was great, and so I watched it and I loved it. And then I watched Unbreakable and I loved it. And then I believe I watched Signs as well when I was younger, and I loved it. But those were the only 3 that I'd seen until I decided to go through all of his films. So I only had the 3 of the really good ones in my mind. And I was like, oh yeah, perfect track record in my opinion. 3 for 3, 3 great flicks. But yeah, when I went through all of them, like you said, or like we were saying beforehand, he's made some bad films. But I think there's like a great earnesty to everything that he makes. I think that like they're very hopeful films. They're very like sort of, they fly in the face of like cynicism a lot of the time, and that really like touches me. I think that's really cool. Not that, there can be great cynical films. There's a lot of great cynical films and a lot of great cynical filmmakers. But I don't know, I'm just sort of always like intrigued by everything that Shyamalan does, whether it's good or bad. And I think he's got a fascinating career arc. Like, I think we'll get much into it, but that was a long way of saying the first one I watched, I believe, was The Sixth Sense. And it was great.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's third. I guess let's if you're ready, I'd say let's jump in. Thank you for everything you said. I think you share a lot of the same feelings that I do about him as an artist. And let's see if also like what maybe we both like, because maybe you might see something I'm not going to see. So I think I'm really excited to hear your thoughts.
I'm excited. Have you seen all of them, or you said you've seen most of them, or what's your Shyamalan story? What was the first one you saw?
So I imagine it was The Sixth Sense. I don't really recall that one the same way, because Signs in the Village I saw at least like 4 or 5 times. Like growing up, they are like here in America, like on like TNT or TBS or like I don't know, all like just on like daytime like rerun movies. Those were on a lot, and I remember just catching them. And I think I caught like Signs, like half of it, like one day at my grandma's house, and I like just sat and watched it, and it was I was like, this movie is pretty damn good. Like, not that I think what's funny is even good. I think what's funny about him, Sixth Sense, I feel like by all like understandability gets all the praise, but even after that you start getting a lot of detractors and people mocking and just like really like being derisive of his work for like I don't really know for what thing. It's not like, I feel like there's way more like directors with like because you hear this in passing of like some sort of ego he may have or whatever. I don't really know where that comes from, but it's just,
I think that's just racially coded.
That's what I feel, for sure.
I think that he's like he's confident and he's not white. He's Indian, obviously, if you don't know. He was born in India, moved to Philadelphia, I assume, because that's where all of his films are set when he was young. But I think that's definitely racially coded, because there's a lot of like, confident white directors that don't get near the ire that people have for Shyamalan. It was like, as soon as he became popular, people were just like ready to tear him down. And also to like, no one pokes at like the ego of, white male directors ever. No one's like, friggin' Spielberg is so full of himself, or that's not really a good example. I don't know if no one's like, oh, fuck Ridley Scott, that guy is like so full of himself, but people say that about Shyamalan all the time, and it's like, how, in what way? He's confident. Okay.
And you know what I think for one, yes, it is that it's racially coded. I also believe that he has this certain naivete about his storytelling that's very just earnestness and like no holds like sincerity, whereas a lot of art like needs to be pulled back and reserved to be like artistic and cool and like, so people it's less hard to mock it, and his like doesn't have that. Like, you said
no that's a
you said point. you had thoughts about Lady in the Water, and I just finished it this morning, and I have thoughts. It's a
that's the big one where I think like everyone hated it so much, and that's the one where people most are like, oh, look at this like egotistical guy. It's about like how his written word will save the world, and yeah, it is kind of silly, like, but I think that that's a movie about people coming together and trying to like band together around the idea of like a great story, like uniting around a great story, and that going on to like have a profound impact in people's lives. Which there's this great book, have it right here, called The Man Who Heard Voices.
Yes.
Or How M. Night Shyamalan Risked His Career on a Fairy Tale and Lost. And it's about the making of Lady in the Water, and the whole book is sort of about like Shyamalan battling his own voices of self-doubt and his own like kind of difficulties in like rallying the film crew of that film together to kind of band around this like odd, weird film that he was trying to make, this odd fairy tale, and how he, you know, just all the difficulties with that. And I don't, you know, in a vacuum, I don't know if I'd say Lady in the Water is a tremendous film or anything. The first time I watched it before reading this book, I was like, it's okay. I don't think it's as bad as everyone says, but it's not great. But after reading this book and then watching it, I just see it so clearly as like an analogy for, or a metaphor or whatever, for M. Night's desire to like be able to band together this like crew of people to make this great movie, to all feel like, you know, moving towards something together, and all band around like the words that he's written in order to save the world. And that's a very like hopeful, non-cynical movie, except that it's very, very violent to this one like film critic who's like this snobby film critic who's like, no, a film has to do this, and the movie just like violently kills him. But other than that, it's so nice, it's so hopeful, it's like this great film. So I just think Lady in the Water is like a fascinating movie if you read it as like that's like M. Night's dream in a way, that he can like like everyone can get behind this great idea. They can all rally together, they can all be like united, and they can make something great together, and it'll make an impact on the world. People will love it. And I just think it's fascinating, more than I even think it's like great, although I do also think it's good.
Thank you.
That's my Lady in the Water. I was waiting for us to get to Lady in the Water to talk about that. I know we were going to go chronologically, but just because you brought it up, I had to put it out there.
No. I think that was an amazing, like expression of how that one piece. But I think all his pieces have that, of this like, there's so much going on, and it's all on the surface in some sense, and also not, that it's easy to just be like, oh yeah, that was a movie. Like, I think the worst things you can say about most of his work is like, that's a movie. But like, even then, there's like, if you key into it, like any movie, I guess. But with his, there is this like sweetness to it. There is this like, like, let's just start with Praying with Anger, because I want to hear your thoughts about it. And it's not that I don't want to continue thoughts on any of these other ones, but again, I feel like we have so much to say about how all of them kind of...
No, yeah, we'll go as we go through that. But I just wanted to respond to one thing that you said, that I definitely completely agree that like him being so hopeful and non-cynical does draw the ire of like so many people are so cynical, and they approach art in that way, and sort of like to be, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that like people see hopefulness or just like earnestness, I think, like showing you really care about something, that's like cringy for a lot of people, and they see that as a negative. It's like, oh no, you care so much, that's so cringe. And it's like, I don't believe in cringe. I think like it's good to care about stuff. That's awesome. But anyway, sorry, I definitely agree is all I wanted to say. And now let's go to Praying with Anger.
No, don't be sorry. I think all of what you, and we're gonna, I think, get, like, the nice thing about this is just a warm up. We're gonna get to all of this, you know, in the conversation.
Yeah,
even more like full fleshed. But yeah, let's start with Praying with Anger. 1992, if I'm not mistaken, I believe.
I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. 92.
So.
Financed by his family, I believe.
Which is a theme. And
I think he...
Like... No, I was just going to say, like you brought up with that book, I think there is this, like, almost simuli of him, of how, like... because I think with The Visit on, he's all self-financed his movies again. So there is like these themes that show up in his own work, but also in like his life has thematic moments, which is like kind of interesting in a lot of ways. But what were you gonna say about it?
So yeah, like I said before, I watched all of these films like when I went through his whole filmography. That was like probably a year and a half ago. So I rewatched some of them in preparation, but only the ones that I like really wanted to rewatch. Some of them I was like, I don't feel like I need to rewatch them. So this was one that I didn't rewatch, to be honest. I remember thinking it's okay. It does set up like some of the kind of crisis of faith ideas that pervade like many of his films, and I think we can sort of talk more about that, like crisis of faith in the spiritual sense, but also just like having faith in yourself and like self-confidence and believing in yourself and so on. It's okay. It's sort of like, it's interesting that he's the lead, and it's the only film that I think he sort of explicitly like explores his cultural identity. So in that way, it's kind of an interesting watch in like if you're going through all of Shyamalan's films and trying to sort of learn about him as a human being. I think on its own, it's fine. I don't know. Did you? What were your thoughts?
Again, I think this is when I first saw that his earnestness wasn't in vain or like in this like self thing, more like trying to relate to others. And this is something I saw a lot going through like the blockbuster. He never really went blockbuster, except maybe one movie you could say, but the rest is like the ones that did well for him. But yeah, he likes character studies, and I actually was listening to an interview that he was talking about like how he writes his screenplays like a play, and then he has to adapt it for the screen, which is like again, a screenplay is a play, but most people write it with the thought of how it's actually going to be shot. And it's interesting to hear that he just writes stories. And I do think that's like he's a storyteller at large. So I think there's a lot of seeds being planted in this one. I don't know, thematically and narrative-wise, I think there's some special nuggets in there, but then like and this is something that I think comes up in his later work, and this isn't I don't want to, it's not a bad thing, but is his scores like underline everything in some sense to the point of like almost like a cartoonish thing. And with this one, there's like a lot of times where like the score just like shows up as like booty like accent, or like it's like and not when I actually think, and that's not all the time, but like like it's interesting to see how he's engaging with his culture and his ideas. But yeah, I think it's a very simple coming of age story. But there's some interesting things that I do think resonate throughout the rest of his work, even if not so apparently like noticeable, I guess. Because again,
it is.
What's that? Was
sorry?
No, just the genre is just not similar by any means. But
yeah, it is interesting that he started as a screenwriter basically. Well, I mean, I guess this is before he had any screenwriter. But anyway, I think like he would probably classify himself like in the... He writes all his films. Like he's definitely heavy on the writing side. And that you said like he sort of views his films as a play and play-like and prioritizes the story. Because I think that like his films, especially his early films, like that run of like Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, Signs, The Village, those are incredible visual films and like very like incredible visual storytelling. There's stuff like in Unbreakable where it's like the camera's swinging over here. Like I'm thinking of sort of I guess it's the second scene when the train crash happens and like all the stuff leading up to the train crash, where it's like beautifully shot. Like we're behind two like seats on the train, and we're starting like on one side where you can sort of see Bruce Willis, and then it's like we kind of swing to the other side and you can see someone else go, and then we swing below and we can see him like take off his wedding ring, and that we learn some. It's just very like interesting visual storytelling, where I think like he has a great sense of where to place the camera in order to like not just like what's the coolest shot, but like to actually convey story. So I'm rambling now, but I think it's just like interesting that like he would, that he does think so play-like, because I think he has like a very great sense of like visual storytelling in a way that most directors don't. And he was working with amazing cinematographers on those films as well, but I think like it runs through all his films. It's not only what was it? I think Tak Fujimoto shot Unbreakable, and he's like, he rules. I think he shot on Sixth Sense also. Anyway, I'm rambling.
No worries. Well, one thing I found kind of interesting is, just before we get off Praying with Fingers, his camera work is like, his framing is there, and it's interesting. He, there's a lot of indie films made around this time, and they're almost like predecessors to like mumblecore, where they're like, I think Slacker, I don't know if you've seen that by Linklater, but this is around that same time, and I think he has a good eye for stuff, but he's also not afraid to just let it ramble. Whereas I think Shyamalan is very, like you're saying, the control of how he uses it to tell like the narrative is, I don't know, it's there in this one, which I think is something that's interesting about it.
Yeah.
I don't really know if the rest of it, I think, if people want to check it out, that would be cool. But I don't. It's nothing that I'm like, oh wow, like some debuts by certain directors are really like, they're off to the races. But I think his is interesting because this one is like just a pretty simple story, and it's it's nice. But that's all I guess I could say about it. But
yeah, it's worth checking out if you are like a Shyamalan completist. But it's on its own, it's not a great film. Yeah.
What would we call a
But I do definitely agree that you can see a lot of seeds of future things in there. And like I 100% agree that like even from this film he has a very clear sense of like I would say like mainstream sensibilities in terms of like, or like populist sensibilities, I guess, in terms of like how to film something. Well, that's a really unintelligent way of saying that, but like I know he always cites Spielberg as like his favorite or his biggest influence growing up, and I think you can see that, like especially in the early films, like especially in that run that I was talking about. Like not that they don't feel like Spielberg movies necessarily, like they're very idiosyncratic, they're very Shyamalan, but just in the sense of like I think he's trying to make films that do have a broad appeal, even in their like idiosyncrasies. Like I think that like he wants his films to be able to connect, and he knows how to like kind of craft a film that is like can work out of, yep, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that they're accessible but while still carrying their own idiosyncratic, like, yeah. So, they're still his movies, but people can. I think something about filmmaking that is lost at large is like visual language does help engage audiences, and sometimes like some of the best movies might not have the most engaging for like everyone. So I think that's what also got him to be so popular, is that we'll get into it, but let's
yeah. And in a way might have been his like downfall in a way. Like you can kind of see that in the book that I referenced. Like he's very concerned with his films like having a broad impact, like having a broad appeal, and I think that like once he started to kind of like or once he stopped connecting with people, like in that run of like The Village and then Lady in the Water and like Airbender and After Earth and stuff. Like I think when he was in the and The Happening, when he was in that middle part where it's like, oh, what, and why am I not connecting anymore, and like what can I do that will still have like a broad appeal? Okay, well I'll make this adaptation of like this beloved kids show, or okay, I'll make this like Will Smith vehicle. And it just doesn't feel like it's like Shyamalan being Shyamalan. It's him trying to like figure out, oh, how can I still have that mass appeal? And I'm getting way ahead, we're going to get to it, but like it's once he decides like, okay, let me just make something small, let me try to make something that's like more in the vein of like what first made me like who I am with the visit, and like let me finance it myself, let me really feel like I'm just like on my heels and just like making something small and not worried about making this like great appeal. That's what ended up appealing. Like, and then Split was huge and Glass was, you know, financially huge. I know people didn't really like it, but it's just interesting. I think that like that worry of kind of like, am I appealing to everyone, and then like, oh my god, I'm not, so I gotta scramble, what will I do that'll be appealing? Like, I don't want to pathologize him, I don't know him like individually, but you can kind of see it in his work. Like, that seems like something he's concerned with, and it was working at first, and that's what made him so, you know, beloved and popular, and then also sort of his downfall as an artist. But sorry, you're trying to keep us on the track.
No, you're good.
Keep us on the track.
Again, I think I said this before we started, but yeah, I want to hear all these thoughts about how, because this is part of what the series is trying to get at, is like, what is auteur theory? I mean, I think we all know that it actually doesn't truly exist, and I think actually on Is It Whack you guys have talked about how, you know, by only focusing on not, I didn't mean to wave my hands like that, but like how only focusing on like the auteur, it forgets how film is a collaboration. And I think Lady in the Water is an interesting thing of like, if it is almost a literal mirror of that production, I don't think it actually was written that way, or that was how it was supposed to be shot, but in some sense the characters and the production crew were like reflecting each other in a very, you know, that's a water theme, I guess, as well, but like cool, but it shows that it's like, oh, not one person can make a film. If it literally is an allegory for filmmaking, it's showing that no, it's like we're all in this together and we're all like upholding each other. And I think that's, but that's another tangent, but I guess that's the exciting thing, and that's what I want these tangents to be, because I do think we get into these creases of what an artist is, and how an artist is, yes, an artist, but also they're an artist within the world, and they can't do anything without the world in some sense. And I think Shyamalan is also a very apt director for that case in some sense, because he does want to engage with the world at large, which is beautiful and something to be admired by him. Even if you're like, well, that's not a smart way to make art, but I think it is something.
It's not how I would want to make art. Like, I don't want to be like kind of in the mind state of like, how will other people react to this, because like you never know, you can't control that. And you know, even some of the like thematic stuff that I talked about in Lady in the Water, of like wanting to have this like great impact in the world, like with the art that you make, wanting to like connect to people and whatever. It's like, I don't think we should, well, do whatever you want as an artist, like create from whatever point of view. I don't think you'll ever have like a great impact if you're trying to make art from the perspective of like, I need to make a great impact with this art. I think that like the stuff that does end up having a great impact is usually like made from just like, oh, I want to say this thing, I want to express this feeling, and then people connect with it because it's like, oh wow, that person was being honest, and that person was just like saying what they felt, and I feel that also. And you know, I think that like if we're kind of coming from the point of view of like, I need to make something important, it'll probably never be important. It'll just feel like contrived, or feel like you have some delusions of grandeur or whatever, when like, just be honest, and try to make something from an honest point of view. And you know, that sort of goes back to what I was saying. Like, I feel like that's what he did when he went back to make The Visit, went back to make Split and Glass. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I've tried really hard to make like a broad impact, and I've wanted my films to make like an impact on the world, and they didn't, and now people think I suck and I'm, you know, a joke and whatever. Why don't I just like not worry about that anymore? Why don't I just try to like make from just like, this will be a fun thing to make, this is a cool idea, I'm just gonna try to do this. And those films ended up having way more of an impact, because I think that like you're coming at it from a more honest place, and from a place where you're not like worried about what other people are going to think, because we can't control that. It's impossible.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no one could control that. But again, I think there is like this like, yeah, I don't know. He's an interesting person. And again, I think also I hope that none of this conversation for me, like you say, you said at one point, but it's like I hope none of it is me like ascribing things to him that may or may not be there. I think this is just my perspective of like, you know, him as a filmmaker and not that we can be, but like, you know, whatever. I'm not saying you're doing any of that too.
We're viewing it from the lens of his work, and we're trying to sort of understand him, like, and just through what we know, what we've heard him say, like, I don't want to like put anything on him that he thinks. This is just what I'm observing from the work. Like, it seems like someone who wanted to make a great impact struck out and then realized like, I have to do this. But maybe that's not what he thinks at all. Maybe he's sitting at home, perfectly confident, feeling okay about everything he's ever done. I doubt that from the book that I read about him and from interviews I've heard of him.
And my comment isn't to say that that's what you're doing. I think some people might show up and think this is the history of him, and this is the analysis of both mine and Adam's perspective on how we see him as an artist. But that's the long introduction to Wide Awake, a beautiful title for a strange movie.
Yes. From what I know, this film sort of got taken away from him in a way. I think it was a Miramax film, right? And it was like it was made years before. Yeah, I'm reading now. I should have done this research before, but I did have it in my brain. I remember hearing this. It was made in '95 and wasn't released until '98, and I think that was largely because Weinstein sort of fucked with the release. Sorry to invoke his name. He fucked with like the release and just like the film, and it sort of got taken away from Shyamalan in production. So, I don't think like Shyamalan's ever disowned this film as far as I know, but it doesn't feel... Well, there are some themes that actually I would say certainly run through his work. And you're nodding, so maybe you could speak.
Well, I want to hear what you thought, because there are just some surface things but also there's just weird conversations. I think his movies always have these like, even when they're these wide appeal, like this is a kid's movie, if I'm not mistaken, or like some form of a kid's movie.
Yeah.
Maybe not actually, though. Maybe just about a kid. And those are two different things, though.
It's such a weird kid's movie, but I think it is supposed to be a kid's movie.
It's like really sad.
This kid who's like so scared about dying, and so he like becomes obsessed with like every religion or something. Yeah. Is that what it was? It's something like that. I haven't seen it in like 2 years, but... And he's just like sure he's gonna die, and it's like it's so weird. It's not bad, it's just weird.
I don't know. I kind of don't... I mean, there's probably like insidious and awful reasons, and also just like shitty business decisions why it didn't get released. But there is some sort of sense of like, this is just a wild movie. It is like, if it was a kid's movie, like it's like 400 blows by way of like like Disney or something. It's like, but like if like I don't know, it's like it's this very earnest story about like confronting death at a young age. But it's I don't know. There's gags, there's stuff, there's and that's something about him that I think even in Praying with Anger, I think he has this like almost like. So he has like jokes and wit in his stories a lot of the time that when they happen, it's easy just to be like, this is strange, but actually there's like, it's a joke and it's kind of funny.
I think he's got such an interesting brand of humor. Like there's stuff in like Sixth Sense. Do you remember the part where it's like the other actor, like the kid there's the kid who's like an actor, and it shows like his commercial, and it's so funny and so weird, but it's still played like it's really tense. Like the horror or the humor in his like thrillers and his horror movies are never really used to cut the tension. It's sort of like baked in this like weird way where the joke itself feels like scary and tense, and you're like, that's funny, I think, but it's just like, but I love it. I think it's interesting. Like I like that he doesn't feel the need to, He feels like he can do something silly, and it's cool. And I think that's a thing a lot of people didn't like, especially like in Old. I think there's so much stuff that's like weird and funny and silly, but is still baked, like wants it to still be baked into like the thriller and the horrorness of it. And I think, like, you know, just from conversations I've had and things I've seen people write, like that stuff didn't really connect with people and often doesn't, and people just feel like, what the hell is this? It feels so weird. But I love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think in some sense we'll get to it, but we can move to Sixth Sense. But I'm just going to make a brief passing comment, because maybe you'll
Sure.
pick up on it as well, because I think also with discussions there's certain things that you'll be picking up as you like think of it. So, but I do think he has, like, when I watched Old at like 5:30 this morning, because I kind of fell behind on watching these movies.
You got up at 5:30?
But
oh my gosh,
I really liked it. But there's like, it's like campy in some senses, like, but then there's like then there's a smash cut to like some real shit happening, and I don't think he's aware that his humor is campy, but like, I think again, just earnestness is I don't know what Sontag says about camp, but she says like sincerity is part of what makes camp. And I think that's true of Shyamalan, is even though he is, I think he knows he's telling a joke, but I don't think he realizes within the context of the movie, his joke holds so much different like meanings and weight. Or maybe he does. I don't know. But it doesn't seem like it, because these jokes, like, I feel almost like are not distracting, but they kind of pull you out, and it is kind of this weird, like, what the fuck am I what am I watching right now? But
yeah, I could definitely see that. Maybe it's just because, like, I've spent so much time watching these Shyamalan films that I'm almost expecting it in a way. Like, that was like a critique I heard a lot of people say of Old, and when I watched Old, I was just like, well, that's just Shyamalan. I don't know.
That's just my
that's
guy.
like what I expected. But I don't disagree necessarily, like, with it as a critique. I just maybe I'm just used to it, or it doesn't really bother me in the same kind of way. It almost like excites me. But I also think there is like, you know, you do compare that to Sixth Sense, and Sixth Sense, it does feel far more, like, for lack of a better word, purposeful, or like baked into like the very like DNA of the film, where, you know, in something like Old, it's just kind of like, I don't even know what you want me to feel by saying this joke. Like, is this... I have no idea what you're trying to get at. And I'm still into it, but I understand why people would reject that.
No, and I engage with it because I think I'm a very earnest audience. Like, I watch Lifetime movies with the same heart that I watch any other movie with. And it's not because...
Hell yeah.
It's because I'm not above any piece of media, and I can learn and engage with it and learn about things that I otherwise maybe wouldn't if I was like scoffing at it every 5 seconds. So
I know one piece of media you're above. Sidewalk art. Like, you're physically above it. You're looking down at it. Maybe crosswalks. Well, you're pretty tall. Maybe like clothes. You're usually above that.
Yes. No.
I'm sorry. Yes, Wide Awake. Okay film. Interesting film. I think that it does set up, you know, I sort of said this before, but how I do feel like a lot of his films are about, like, you know, an internal crisis of faith in a way. In this film, you can definitely read the spiritual side of that, like, pretty literally. He's trying to, like, the kid has this, like, internal crisis of faith. Oh, I'm gonna die. I'm obsessed with death, or whatever it is. And he's sort of looking to, like, various religions as, like, maybe his way, like, finding spiritual faith will, like, sort of help him, like, deal with his, like, internal crisis of faith. And I think that's something we're gonna see as we keep going through the films. Like, I think that you could definitely see that in Sixth Sense. Absolutely in Signs. That's probably the most, like, clear one. But I think you know, even like Unbreakable is like about, you know, in my read of it in this stream, is like you know, feeling just like this really lack of, like, self-confidence, feeling like totally like a lack of belief in yourself, and then having to, like, realize, oh, I do have this, like, I do have this inner strength, even though I feel like I got nothing. I have to, like, find my strength again. That's what that whole film's about for me, is like finding your internal strength, and it's shown as then the metaphor is he's a superhero who has to realize that he's a superhero. That's my Wide Awake. that's my spiel on Wide Awake.
It's the prequel to Unbreakable.
Yeah.
No. I think it's.
Well, in a very and I would say in like superficial senses, it definitely leads us to like Sixth Sense pretty well. I mean, both about this kid. That's the. He does have movies about kids. He does love movies about kids. I think The Visit also.
After
Avatar,
Earth
I suppose
is about
you could say.
a child. I have a lot of of thoughts about that one.
True,
again,
definitely.
even there's nuggets that share within other parts of his films that I think it's very easy to like not see when you're just like, oh yeah, that movie. It's easy just to think about the movie and not his storytelling, because I think his storytelling is very particular, like you say. But I think we're on to the Sixth Sense, the dark side of.
That's the cool thing about doing this sort of exercise and a podcast like this, where like, even as we talk about like Praying with Anger and Wide Awake, which are films that like on their own I don't think are great. I don't even really think are good. I think they're both like just fine. But when you like look at it in the context of someone's entire filmography, they just become interesting. Like to be able to like draw those lines, even a film that was sort of taken away from him, or like an early film that was like basically a student film. I don't know
if he did or not, but I think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about the production history, which is my fault on the research. But it does feel very much like
good.
The early kickings of a film, and not maybe a whole film at once. But
yeah, but like just to be able to like see those things that will end up like becoming or will like permeate throughout his entire filmography. It becomes fascinating. That's the cool thing about going through like film by film. And you see something that like, like Lady in the Water, I don't think I ever would have like thought what I thought about it if I hadn't like, seen all of his other films and then read this book and really tried to like learn about him a little bit more as a person, or at least what he's, willing to share. And then it's like you can kind of find this like newfound respect, because it's also like trying to understand like where's an artist coming from when they like make this work. I always try to, even if it's something I don't like just try to understand like why did they make this decision? Like what was their intention, and was that successful or was it not successful? I don't know, rather than just like, well, just dismissive. I guess I just don't like being dismissive. But let's talk about Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense, 1997, I believe, which is kind of wild. No, it's 99. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I think it was 99. Yeah, because it was in that big, the famous 99. Everyone always talks about it as like the best year. Matrix, Eyes Wide Shut, Fight Club, I think, a bunch of films. 99.
So. Do you remember the specific time you saw this the first time?
I think it was probably after Jizz in My
Pants.
Oh,
at the end of Sixth Sense. Yeah.
Because there's the...
Yeah.
So I think I knew it. The twist.
2008?
When did that come out? I guess
it's like 2000.
Maybe it was
almost the whole
2008? Yeah. So I would have been like 12. I probably watched it after that.
Oh wow, that's such an early, or that's such a funny prompt to watch a film. It was like, oh yeah, what was that reference to that joke song? But it's good, yeah.
But I loved it like the first time I saw it, and I've only loved it more and more. It's probably like boring to say, but it is probably my favorite Shyamalan. I love The Village though, like that would be, and I love Unbreakable. But I think Sixth Sense is just sort of like a perfect film. And it's hard to even like it's one of those films where it's just like it was such a huge it's like talking about The Matrix. Like, both films came out in 99, three of my favorite directors, the Wachowskis and Shyamalan. But both of those films, it's just kind of like, they're just sort of perfect. And like, it's been talked about a million times. Hard for me to even like say anything about it that's sort of new or original, but I love it. I love them. I just had to bring The Matrix into this. You know I was going to talk about The Matrix somehow.
No, I think that's I mean, I love The Matrix too. And I think this series would be great to do with the cast. No, how do you say it? The Wachowskis.
Yeah,
yes.
The Wachowskis.
Okay. Yeah. Because their
would be
filmography is equally as brilliant. And if anything, does mirror Shyamalan's with how, if anything, almost quicker, how they started getting derided almost even once the sequels show up for The Matrix. Which is like...
Yeah. Between just one film. It was like Matrix was the biggest film ever. These are the greatest filmmakers ever. Then Reloaded comes out, which I think is a masterpiece, but I know, most people don't. And then it was like, wow, the Wachowskis suck. They're the worst filmmakers ever.
But when and the similar thing in Shyamalan is, one, they're storytellers, and also they are super earnest. Sense9...
absolutely.
Cloud Atlas obviously has some actually awful, racism in it, unfortunately. But Sense9 is one of the most sweetest and beautiful shows I think I've ever seen, and it's a flawed show, but it's also it's a show that I don't think any artist can make but them in some sense. It's like if Terrence Malick, it's like if Terrence Malick made an action movie. And it's beautiful. It's like so beautifully shot for a TV show. Like, it's really well done. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I would love if Terrence Malick made an action movie.
It'd be like, what's that?
Okay, so
I was just gonna say, it'd be all like, you just hear stuff in the background and just stuff happening around you, and then someone just like walking around and just thinking, it'd be fun.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about The Sixth Sense, obviously, well, I guess, if anyone doesn't know, it was pretty much like, it was like one of the most successful films of all time. I think at the time it came out, it was like one of the top 10 highest grossing films ever, which is pretty wild.
I think for like 10 years or something, it was like
that's
really
wild.
high. Like, it broke a bunch of records. It was wild.
Yeah, and it was like a phenomenon. Like, I mean, I wasn't old enough to know, but from what I've heard, and looking back, it's like it was a massive phenomenon. He got like nominated for Best Director, I believe, at the Oscars. So a huge hit, like commercially and critically. That's what made people be like, "Wow, this guy is the best." And I think most people assume it's his first film. Sometimes I'll tell people that he has 2 films before, and people will be surprised. Obviously, everyone knows about the twist ending, but I think that the twist is actually is great. Like, I don't think it's like a twist just for twist's sake, or that it's like, but if you kind of read the film as like sort of a film about like wanting to like reach out to people and help people, and feeling like, Bruce Willis's character is like plagued by the fact that he wasn't able to help this one kid, and now he's like, all he wants to do is like be able to help people and know that he's like helping people and making an impact and whatever. But the twist, like, reframes it as like, well, you have to, you have to be able to help yourself first. Like, if you're in pain, if you're struggling, if you're doing whatever, it's impossible to like, or very difficult to be able to like reach out to other people and to help them. Which I think is lovely and is beautiful. And I think like, it's a twist that only like aids that kind of core theme of the film, versus like, I feel like people just like, it's easy to make fun of the twist. It's easy to make fun of like twist endings and whatever, and that Shyamalan goes to that well often. But I think usually, at least in the best stuff, like I think Unbreakable does the same thing, where the twist of Unbreakable, well, it's not really a twist, but the fact that like the reveal that Mr. Glass like did all of the sorry, spoiler alert. Did all of the crashes and whatever. But that's sort of a twist as well to like, the film is about believing in yourself and believing in who you are. And I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, but I just feel like it's a twist that like affirms Mr. Glass's sense of self and kind of like understanding of who he is and his belief in like there are these heroes out there, and everything that I do, all this bad stuff that I do or have done is like in pursuit of like believing what I believe and like believing that that's true. I don't know if I'm making any sense. All I'm trying to say is that I think his twists are great and usually aid the core theme of the movie, and it's an easy thing to just like make fun of that he goes to that well often, but I don't think it's ever like just for twist's sake. Like I think it's great.
Yeah.
Whoo, there I go.
I think in some interviews I've heard him say is no, well, beautiful. I do think I have the same feelings. Again, I think me and you are on the same page of literally how I think again it's like I think when something becomes a punching bag in like public conversation, I think it's very easy just to be like, to disregard any context or like understanding of an artist and just be like, no, they do that silly thing.
Yeah.
It's like, when Lady Gaga used to go to the MTV Movie Awards in like a meat dress or, all those fun ideas and concepts.
Right.
It's very easy just to be like, oh, they dress up. They're not talented. They're not this. And I think the hard thing about Shyamalan is when he does fall, then it's easy for people to point and be like, no, he was always like bad or he was always not a good artist. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. But like, there's like some directors who like people really love, and there's a lot of movies of theirs that I'm like, that was kind of not the best movie. But maybe that's just my opinion. So, but there's like. I think Wild at Heart is a very flawed movie. It's cool in Lynch's whole like piece of like his career, but I don't know if it doesn't work as a movie, at least not for me, but that doesn't mean that he's not like, doesn't mean he's not a talented like filmmaker. He is, but yeah.
But that's the thing I love about Shyamalan also, that it's like the fact that he's made some of my least favorite movies is like it's and then he and then came back and like made other things that friggin' rule. And I don't know, I just like people taking a swing. Like I just like people trying something, and if it fails, that's okay, as long as you're like trying and you're making an effort. I'll always be interested. But yeah, to what you say, I do think like there is like a sort of dogpiling like a public kind of dogpiling that happens, and a reframing of, and it's the same thing when like someone makes something really really good, and then you look back at like their past. I remember Sebi saying this about Peter Ramsey when he like directed Spider-Verse. That's his name, right? Peter Ramsey,
I think.
And then people were like sort of looking back and like reclaiming the Rise of the Guardians film and being like, actually this film is amazing. And it's like, or maybe you're just saying that because like now he's made something amazing, so you're looking back and being like, actually it was always like this. And maybe it was. Maybe it's great. I've never seen it. But I think that just sort of happens when it's like people, it's sort of it's like a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. But then using that also as a way to look back and in the Shyamalan's case be like, well, actually, none of his films were ever good. He made one good film. Well, I mean, even The Sixth Sense wasn't even that good. It's like, well, things can just be good. People can make stuff that's good and bad. It doesn't mean that everything else they've done is in that, like, everything else was good or everything else was bad. We should encourage that you can make good and bad stuff. That's great.
But I think that's the thing, is to see an artist fail is to see that they're human, and what person wants to see a human artist? Yeah. They want to make them see attempts to appeal to that, but not to actually like make art that reflects that. And I think that's why. True. Again, I think it's like sincerity. If like
you said it so well. That's so good. People want a perfect artist. People want like flawless, like
yeah. They don't want to see a bad piece of work by someone. Like who wants to buy an album and it's like 8 of these songs suck and there's like 2 okay songs and you're like, who? Yeah, I'm never gonna buy The Happening again or something like that. Like I think The Happening actually is like this beautiful piece of art. It's like it's bad, but it's. We'll get to it. Let's. Do you feel like you've said your stuff on Unbreakable, or do you have like some specific thoughts you want to get down on it? Because I feel like we've touched on both. That's why, like.
Yeah, I feel like that's my core. That was what I rewatched, and I mean, just because I wanted a reason to rewatch it, like I just love it so much. This is like not really in the vein of like. I guess this is now just. Reviewing the movie, which I know we're not really necessarily trying to do. I think that like it's a really, really good film and basically almost perfect until the last like 20 minutes. I think that like him realizing he's a superhero is the climax for me, but I know it probably Shyamalan and whoever else made the decisions probably felt like then it needed him to like do something superhero-esque, but it's just so dark. It just gets so dark and grim and gloomy at the end, and it almost just like I feel like it straddles a good line of like matching his like dismalness and his like lack of belief in himself in this sort of like gloomy tone, but still being sort of fun. It still like can be kind of a like grim superhero movie, but then it just gets so dark and unpleasant to watch, and that's the only thing that doesn't really work for me in the movie. Other than that, I think it's basically perfect, and I love it. And yeah, I highlighted some of the like thematic stuff that is like trying to find that sense of self-confidence, that belief in yourself, which I think permeates through a lot of his work, and seems like a thing that he sort of like struggles with, at least from reading The Man Who Heard Voices. Like it's a thing he was very open about in that book, of struggling with like self-confidence and believing in yourself, and the voices they reference in that title is like voices of self-doubt. So it's cool to watch that film and sort of feel like that's what he's like kind of getting at with the movie, in my opinion. I know you can read a lot into it, but that's sort of my read of the movie, and I think it's great. I think it's really good. Did you have any either Sixth Sense or Unbreakable, I guess, before we go to the next one?
I think, just something you mentioned about the darkness is I also think what's funny about him is he does have this almost like childlike approach to storytelling, like kind of like fables and fairy tales, but then, and which is, is touched upon, I think, within superheroes, and, is like now, in the world, something that people are trying to like reckon with is like, oh, our superhero stories like myths, which is at the very least, I don't know, they probably are, whatever, and that's not a bad thing, but but anyways, I one thing is also, even though his stories have that approach where it does feel almost like a child, like a kid's movie, which also I think Wide Awake has. Again, there's some thoughts I'm having about like connection and all these different ways of storytelling, that like these thematic elements he carries in his films. But anyways, is that there's like these like intense like dark moments. So even though it's like this is a story about superheroes, this is like almost a graphic novel, because like you said, that last 20 minutes is like it's almost tonally just like that movie. The movie has been straddling that line of dark and like hope and whatnot, but that one, and there's stuff going on in there that's, I guess, powerful, but it is very, it does just switch, and I feel, I don't know, it's but anyways, and also all I want to say about the Sixth,
and maybe that's kind of a thing also of like that's what like having that power would actually be like. It would be like torturous, like it wouldn't be fun. But
no, and that's why I think when people look at Unbreakable and say it's like one of the best superhero movies, I do not think they're wrong. I think it is like it conveys everything that all these other pieces, like Watchmen or any other like Batman ones when he's old, where he's like reckoning with what being a superhero is. And I feel like this movie like does all of that within like 2 hours and 20 minutes or something, and it's
I think it's even shorter than that. It's like an hour 40.
Which is like, funny because that was movie. Like half his movies are like an hour 40. Because I watched Old and Lady of the Water, and they were both
Yeah.
An hour 40. It's kind of funny.
Well, he wants to have the broad appeal. I think it goes back to what we were saying. Like he's trying to make films that are accessible and like, and he doesn't really let himself like run wild with like, I'm making this 2.5 hour opus that's like, just like no one will like it, but it's I think that he wants films that people can. Sorry, I coughed. But he wants these films that are easy to watch and are accessible and are fun, and yeah, no, that's true. They're all a bit. I don't think he has. Does he have any over 2 hours? Can't even. Maybe Glass. I think Glass.
It might be like 210, but maybe not even like 208. But and just The Sixth Sense, I think, is just a beautiful movie. It's such a sweet and powerful movie, and I think it's easy to look at it because of its cultural status, but like when you watch it, it's not like these other movies. Like I think when you watch The Matrix, you can watch it at a very surface level and not engage with it. And something about Shyamalan I think he does well is he does make these character studies, and Sixth Sense is like at most 4 characters, like main characters, and they all are deserving, and he tries to honor all of their feelings and thoughts. And I think that's like that's what makes it like such a great movie. It's about his journey, but it's also about all these other people's journey alongside him, or he's like lives he's involved in some sense, or maybe not even his life, because he's not really involved with Toni Collette as much as it's between Toni Collette and her son. So, but it's just a beautiful movie.
But I think even those, but even those side characters, it's like they all are clearly struggling in some kind of way, and even like Toni Collette, you could read the same kind of or her character, you could read the same kind of thing as like Bruce Willis's character of wanting to like help, wanting to be able to help her son, but it's just like she's has her own struggles and difficulties and inability to kind of do that. Like I think even all the side characters are sort of united in that wanting to help other people or wanting to reach out, but like needing to kind of figure out how to help themselves first. It's a beautiful film. I agree.
Yeah, and so now we're on to The Village, and if you want, we could always. Oh, you're right.
Signs.
2003 or 2. Excuse me.
Something like that. Which I think has a lot of the I said this already. That one definitely like very clearly gets the like spiritual faith part. Like Mel Gibson, sorry, he's in it. His character is like
pastor.
Was a pastor. Yeah. And then like his wife passed away, and so he sort of moved away from the church, didn't really he lost his faith in that sense. But I think the film is about like all the characters kind of finding faith in themselves in a time of great crisis. And sort of just like, what do you do in a time of crisis? Like, do you, I don't know where I was going with that sentence, but the very end of the film, which I find, it gets a lot of hate. It's kind of silly. It's like you save the day by like pouring water on the aliens or whatever. But it sort of all ties together, like the two kids. The one kid is kind of like has this weird, like, or not weird, other people think it's weird, this like fear of the water. And so she always like keeps cups around, but that's sort of like a, you could read that as like a sort of thing that people say is wrong or weird or whatever about her. The other kid like has his asthma, which ends up like helping save the day in a way, or at least save him. Joaquin Phoenix's character is like a retired a disgraced baseball player because he wasn't like very good, but then he like in a very heavy-handed symbol like grabs the baseball bat and like finds his like strength again to swing away, like isn't guided by his fear or the things that people say is like a negative about him or something he should be insecure about. Like I think it's all, and then Mel finds his literal faith or his spiritual faith again, religious faith again. So it's sort of like all these characters who like, hey, this is the thing that people have told you is like weak about you, and then using that as like a strength, like a strength, like and coming together, and using it to save the day. And it's pretty good. It's good. I think it's really good, actually. I don't know why I said pretty good. I think it's a really strong film.
Excuse me. I'm...
Oh, that's okay. Actually, I'm going to get some water. I'm going to get some water as well. I'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of our M. Night Shyamalan podcast. Please join us next week for part 2. And yeah, let's enjoy the latter half career of M. Night and hear some thoughts about how he swings back. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day. Bye-bye.